Well, there were some rumors recently that the doctors at George Washington University Hospital were preparing a spinal implant into the back of Obama. But but short of that, I don't see him standing up to this. And you know, whether I'm right or not, it's what's most important is what Netanyahu thinks. Now, if he thinks that the U.S. would have that the president would have no option but to fall in behind whatever Israel decides to do to Iran to start taking out their nuclear development facilities, then there's very little disincentive for Netanyahu to wait around. One of the proofs in the pudding, so to speak, is the fact that not only Dagan, the former intelligence chief of Mossad in Tel Aviv, but now the present one came out yesterday briefing Israeli diplomats and said, you know, even if Iran got one nuclear weapon, it wouldn't be an existential threat. Well, why do people how do you define existential threat when we have 200, you know? So there's a big debate going on in Tel Aviv, and these people wouldn't be saying these things if they didn't have real fear, genuine fear, that Netanyahu and Ehud Barak, the defense minister, are going to go half-cocked ashore.
Yeah, so they're even out on a limb in Israel. So it's not just some monolithic, like we hear in the controlled media here, it's even more pro-war than the Israeli media, that you're not pro-Israel, you hate Israel. Ron Paul's an anti-Semite because he doesn't want endless war and preemptive war. In closing, what do you think of how they're attacking Ron Paul for not being pro-war, A, but more importantly, B, in just a few minutes, because I know you've got to go, sir. You got family coming over this evening. And we appreciate you joining us on a Friday night, last transmission we're doing of 2011. In a nutshell, and we've gone over it before in depth, but why is attacking Iran a bad idea? Why does it run from bad to worse to World War III?
Well, a third of the oil in international trade goes through the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians are not lying when they say they can easily close that. Mullen is not lying when he said, as he did 2 years ago, yeah, they could close it. He is lying when he says immediately, oh, but we can open it up. It's not going to be an easy task to open up the Strait of Hormuz if the Iranians do what they're threatening to do. All manner of other things. There's Hezbollah, Hamas. There are all kinds of real terrorists, you know, not fake terrorists, but real terrorists that Iran could control and let loose. Not to mention things like taking pot shots at our forces in Afghanistan or even in Iraq. The big thing, you know, at the close of the year, what people really need to remember, Alex, in my view, is that this has been a very, very bad year for Israel, okay? They lost Egypt. 75 million people in their southern flank who happen to feel strongly about what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians. They lost Turkey, shooting up Turkish nationals on the Mavi Marmara. The Turks don't like that. And they're besieged around the rest of their periphery by people who are doing nonviolent resistance, something that the Israelis hadn't had to cope with before. At the UN, they've taken blows. Now, what does that mean? That means they've only got one friend left, okay? And they need to show, in my view, they feel they need to show the world that, you know, this one friend, the superpower, is worth all the others and throw in 5 more, all to put together, okay? How do they do that? Well, they get involved in a war with Iran, and we, as they fully expect, go in there and send
So they're fleeing forward.
And then they'll show, oh, look, you know, we're still a very powerful nation, because you can't look at us without looking at the United States, which are a great supporter. And that is a very combustible mix.
Why do you think, in closing, then all these current Mossad guy, the former one, are saying it's a, quote, catastrophe? Well, obviously, in layman terms, it'll unify all the Arabs who are busy fighting with each other. It will make Israel look really bad. And then what I'm concerned about is why the West may go with this, because they want a domestic clampdown excuse with the NDAA and the military and the rest of it. The head of Iranian intelligence, as you said a month ago, and I went and checked it, he said it on Press TV, he did say it. He said, we're going to launch asymmetrical warfare in Tel Aviv, in New York, in D.C. I don't know if they do have these sleeper cells, but that's a bad statement by Iran, because the West may do it and say they did. I mean, this is opening up just a nightmare scenario. of control, and maybe the West, who's in all this political trouble domestically, maybe they want that.
Yeah, it could be, it could be pretty volatile here in this country. When people ask me, why would it be that Carl Levin, Democrat from Michigan, head of the Armed Services Committee, Pat Leahy from Vermont, head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, why is it that they would bless legislation that vitiates the Sixth Amendment, that vitiates the Bill of Rights, that goes back on something that those gutsy barons in England won from King John in 1215?
Magna Carta.
Now why would they do that? Well, people say, well, it's easy. The Republicans, they're trying to embarrass Obama. They'll force him to either veto it and appear soft on terrorism, or approve it and lose most of his base. So we got him. Yeah, but what about the Democrats? What about Levin? What about Leahy? You know what I think, Alex? And you can take this to the bank. I think they're afraid. They're afraid about the Occupy movement. They're afraid that they really are the 1%, and 1% against 99 is not good odds. They're afraid that the Capitol Police, the DC Police, the Secret Service will one day realize, hey, we're really part of the 99%. And when Congress is surrounded by people seeking redress of their grievances, who's to call on? I got it. We'll call on the U.S. Army. We'll reverse 133 years of tradition. We'll vitiate the that's long, and the Army. They'll do what they're told. They're trained to do what they're told. We tell them to shoot Rockies, they'll do them. Well, they'll take care of us. They'll get us home to our martini dinners there in Northwest Washington. I think that that's not too much of a stretch, because I can't think of any other reason why people like Levin, who used to be a fairly progressive guy, Leahy, he used to care about the law. Now, Bill of Rights, Magna Carta, hey, we got to watch ourselves because the 99% may come after us. That's a big change. This year is going to be really interesting.
Wow. Yeah, desperate people do desperate things. What's the best website? We've had RayMcGovern.com up there on the screen, but there's also Consortium News, correct?
Yes, consortiumnews.com is where I publish. Robert Perry is the editor there. He's the best investigative journalist still alive in this country, in my book. I also have my own website. It's not Ray, it's RaymondMcGovern.com.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one we've got up on screen. I just didn't see it there. Well, you're doing amazing work, and hopefully early in the new year, Ray, we can get you back on to talk about what's happening domestically. But I concur with you that they are doing this because, well, look at Congress. It comes out most of them are insider trading, and they say it's legal, so it's legal. And they're thinking about Ceausescu. They're thinking about all the other things, and more they're acting like a North Korean dictatorship, not the so-called land of the free, home of the brave. But I got to tell you, I talked to a lot of the military, and I talked to a lot of police, and what the system is doing now is only validating what Ron Paul warned about, only validating what I've warned about and you've warned about. And now this has fueled the biggest awakening I've ever seen. I mean, when you start acting like a bunch of dictator thugs, that has a way of waking people up. Do you think it's going to backfire?
Well, I hope it will. These Occupy movements, I'm part of the Freedom Plaza Occupy movement in Washington. I come home and sleep here at night, but I'm in there often. I think they have a great chance to change the dialogue in this country and to push forward with sweeping reforms, not this or that legislation, but a challenge to the whole system where 1% of our country get lavish lives to lead. And then those in the margins, those in the inner city where I work, those are always taking the hit. They did during Vietnam. They're doing it now during Afghanistan, and God help us, Iran. And there are people making big bucks over these wars. And once the American people realize that 50 cents of every dollar they pay in taxes goes to this military adventurism, that there is enough money. Don't be deceived. There is enough money. It's just being wasted on these military expeditions. You take half of that. You take 25%. You take half of what the military gets. You don't have to fire any teachers, any police officers. You can fix up your towns and your cities, repair the bridges. It's an amazing thing.
That's right.
Once the American people get
all the
that,
money's been going to maintain this global corporate empire that's not even ours. Ray McGovern, have a great New Year coming up. Hope you had a great Christmas, and we're all very pleased that you've been cancer-free for quite a while now.
4 years now, Alex.
All right. God bless. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Well, we certainly are ending out the year's interviews with a great researcher and a great humanitarian and a great patriot to this republic, Ray McGovern. We're going to go to break and come back with the other top 5 down to number 1 stories of 2011 as we plunge into 2012. It's InfoWars Nightly News. Stay with us. We'll be right back.